Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the class, both to new and long-time students and lovers of history. This is History with Sai here today to discuss with you further about our US civil rights topic that we're exploring this term. As always, it's important to stress this is a lesson geared towards the student level, so the content will provide us with some key knowledge and we'll practice our historical skills along the way. With that said, though, notepads and pens at the ready, and let us begin. So you're not already, you should have also watched the previous videos in this series where I gave the background of civil rights up to 1917, so all the way back to, of course, the slavery era, into the Civil War, and then Reconstruction, which then became the Jim Crow era. And so what we're going to explore in today's video is I want to really give us a background to the political situation of what America was like by 1917 and which political parties were at play and which ones the African Americans actually tended to favour at this point in time. Which is very important to stress. I do mean at this point in time in 1917. This is not a reflection of the current state of the parties in modern terms, or even after this era that we're exploring in this short series. So the first political party is the Democrats in 1917. Now there's a lot to say about the Democrats. I'll just give you a bit of background of what happened to them throughout the era we studied in the previous videos. The Democrats did not initially exist. They formed themselves primarily under this man here, Andrew Jackson. And so they had a lot of strong grounding in the southern states in America. They were quite split over the issue of slavery. You had some Democrats who were very supportive of it, understood it, saw it as a valuable institution to make them money, while others were more conflicted about it, saw that it was morally wrong, saw the blacks as more than just mere property and wanted to support them. And this really came to a head for them as time was going on. The Democratic Party formed to its strongest point under Andrew Jackson, the gentleman you can see on the screen. Well, the point was that he wanted to make a party that was a bit more big government, a bit more interventionist, and wanted the federal government to do some action. The general kind of policies they follow are that they were more or less supportive of labor unions. They weren't fully all the way for it, though it had some support for them. They wanted lower or no tariffs. They really believed in free market capitalism, but of course wanted to grow their economy and grow the nation that they were building. And the last thing is they, of course, saw slavery as a key issue that they wanted to get behind and later challenge. So when we get to the 1860s, we of course had this loss of popularity that happens after the Civil War. We had Andrew Johnson who came in and replaced Abraham Lincoln. He himself was a Democrat, but he was Southern leaning. He, of course, bought into that idea of segregation. Maybe the federal government shouldn't intervene in state rights too much. And so he, of course, is the one who didn't really take Reconstruction as far as it should have been. And this really then put into a big era with the Democrats out of power for a long time. But then they managed to get it back with Woodrow Wilson in the 1912 to 13 elections. And so with him, they managed to restore themselves some political strength. Interesting to note with Woodrow Wilson is that because of his history with having family who fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War, he is much more pro-segregation, and he actually brings in some new legislation to strengthen Jim Crow laws in the South. So with Wilson, the party really strengthens those Jim Crow laws that are in the South. They really hinder the literacy of the blacks. They worsen their education, make it very difficult for them to vote. So despite the positives of the Democrats maybe getting in, particularly if you remember our World War One series, where he's more interventionist. He wants to really help out abroad. He really believes America has a big place in the world and should support other nations. For his own people at home, he was not very supportive for the African American community. And so that's the situation for the Democrats at the end of World War One. It's a big thing they're going to have to really contend with, and it's a big reason why they actually don't go on to win the following election. There are other facts, of course. Wilson, of course, falls quite ill. But, the factor of the stance of the Democratic Party can't be ignored all the same. The Southern strategy to keep the South under their control by buying into the narrative and the history of slavery and the racism in the country. It's something the Democrats, really had to contend with for a long time. The second key political party we're going to see throughout this 20th century is the Republican Party. Now, the most famous leader they've had up until this point is Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln's victory in the 1860s, and of course his organizations through it, is what enabled the Republicans to really take some dominance out, really enter their system and really take control of Congress, of American politics for a long swath of time. But it's important to really understand here, the Republicans had control for over 30 years, apart from some brief intermittent spats, let's say with Andrew Johnson and a president called Grover Cleveland. The Democrats really never got a look in. until Woodrow Wilson again, because Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans really transformed their party. They became a politically dominant force in this era. Now, they initially were very, very against slavery. This is the big campaign that Lincoln and the party built themselves around when they came to the fore in the 1860s. However, after the Civil War was won, we did have that initial enforcement with Ulysses S. Grant and trying to really act on the South and really get rid of racism and really ensure Reconstruction could be a thing. But as time goes on, the Republicans change focus and they change towards big business and capitalist economics. They really begin to focus on growing wealth in America, building the corporation's strength, and really financing themselves and improving their industries. They believe in laissez faire capitalism, which is this general belief that the economy is best to run on its own. The individual knows what they're doing, they should be trusted to run themselves, and it's the government's job to actually step back a little bit. They really believe in limited or small government, where the federal government should not really impose on the rights of states too much, and it really should try and let the individual achieve that American dream off their own back. So they typically oppose welfare and labor unions as well. So they're really a really pro-business, pro-capitalist group of politicians here, and that's what they really want to focus on. They also do generally support free trade, but they have dabbled with tariffs in the past. Famous one, McKinley, tariffs to really strengthen the American economy, seeing imports and exports be a strong way to do it. And a big thing for them as well is the belief in low taxes. The lower tax you can have, the better, the more money you can give to the people rather than take off them. And again, this is on brand with their limited government agenda. They don't believe it's the government's role to really help out and support. If anything, they think the government, the more intervene it does do, the more damage it can do as well. And so we have a really big change of trend with the Republicans. They've gone from being very interventionist, going to war, risking the survival of America on the issue of fighting against slavery, to now being a bit more relaxed about it. In some ways you could argue they forgot about it. They've not really done a whole lot since that attempt at Reconstruction. And so they've not really focused on that so much. They really focus on other things, like I say, big business, wealth, and so forth. Now, why is it so important to understand these two parties by 1917? How does this relate to civil rights? Well, it relates to civil rights because, as I said, it really gives us an idea of who the African Americans would probably be supporting in this era. Now, as we said, by 1917, Woodrow Wilson's pro segregationist attitude and his actions to actually support it in some respects has really actually given shifted support towards the African Americans. Again, some key things to really note here. Woodrow Wilson, he actually supported a film called The Birth of a Nation. And this, while at the time was revered as an incredible piece of filmmaking, especially for the 1910s, and what cinema was at the time. It was a very racist film. It really highlighted and really glorified the slavery era. This idea of the lost cause of the Confederacy and that civil rights should have not been achieved the way it was. And this really strengthens the Jim Crow era. And again, with the pro-segregationist policies Wilson was putting out, it really alienated the African American voter. Another thing to remember is that the southern states were being given the freedom to have these literacy tests to really inhibit African American education. And so, because of that, the African Americans couldn't really vote anyway. They couldn't really change things in the South despite all their efforts. So, that really leaves you with a situation where the African Americans are actually a pro Republican party at this time because in the northern states, they can still vote there. And because they know what the Democrats are doing down south and with Woodrow Wilson, they actually lean towards the Republican support groups. So, that's something really, really, really to remember here. We should really remember this and consider this going forward of which side the African Americans are on. And again, kind of add this in with our political, social, and economic change. Will the party that the African Americans vote for and support change as time goes on? Because remember, despite the clear racism the Democrat Party is under with Woodrow Wilson, what they're propagating, what they're populating, the Republican Party arguably isn't doing a lot to really help the African Americans, certainly in the post Reconstruction era. How will this impact things going forward? Well, that's what we're going to find out in the following lesson when we get into the deeper context now and really get ourselves in depth to what exactly is happening in America, what is happening in America in the post World War One era, really how it's going to impact civil rights. Do stay tuned for that. I do hope, as always, you found this quite insightful. If you do want to learn more, make sure you are subscribed. There will be regular videos coming out as the term goes on as we carry on this US Civil Rights series. So make sure you stay tuned for it. This is History with Sire. Thank you for listening.